Hey everyone, my name is Ben Chaish, and today we're gonna go over the probably cheapest, easiest piece of gear that should be in most photographers' bags, whether it is something that is your main lens or probably just a backup for many professionals. And that, in this case, is the Canon 50mm f1.8 STM. It's the EF version, also known as the Nifty 50. So this lens is usually probably the second lens that most people buy. I know for me, I got a camera, I got the kit lens, and then the second lens I bought was an older version of this same Canon 50mm f1.8 lens. And the reason being for most people is it's just a great all-around kind of portrait lens. You get that faster aperture of f1.8, and it just does a lot more than the typical kit lens does for you. And for most people, I feel like getting that shallow depth of field is the first time when they stick it on a camera and they take a photo with it, they're like, oh, okay, this is like that professional look, right? But then for a lot of people, myself included, who are professionals, obviously we're usually upgrading to better 50mm lenses, more expensive ones, all sorts of stuff. I would definitely make a case that having this tiny, tiny lens in your kit, regardless of who you are, is a really, really great thing to have. So I know that Canon has recently come out with an RF version as well, but I originally bought this lens to pair with my Canon EOS 3, which I just did a video about a couple weeks ago. And personally, since the EF glass is often much more inexpensive and I already have the EF to RF adapter, I'm still sticking with using a lot of EF glass, including the Sigma 24mm f1.4 that I'm using on my new Canon R6, which let me know if you want me to do a video about the R6, because I'm sure a lot of people are interested in that as well. Even with this adapter, you can see that the form factor and overall size is still super, super small, and it basically weighs nothing. Now, you're not gonna get a super insane build quality, the glass isn't gonna be incredible, but I will say that the mount is made of metal, so you're not gonna be worried about this thing just ripping and breaking off, which is something that happened to me early on in my wedding career. A little toddler ripped the lens straight off because there wasn't a metal mount. But I would say it is an incredibly inexpensive way to have at least some sort of backup lens. I've had plenty of people have their 50mm lens break and not have anything and have to shoot with a lens that they're not as much familiar with in terms of focal length. And so even if you have a Canon R series or just some other thing, I highly suggest picking up one of these, especially at the low price of, I think they're under like 150 bucks. I think when I bought mine, it was 120. So for that type of price point, it's sort of a no-brainer. Now again, you're not gonna be getting optical perfection, you're not gonna get edge-to-edge sharpness, you're not gonna get the cleanest bokeh with no chromatic aberration or distortion or anything like that. But I will say the results out of here are pretty amazing. A few years ago, my family and I went on a trip to Europe, and then I had to go straight from Europe home, and then got off that plane, got on another plane, and flew to Alabama to speak at the Indie Film Lab workshop that was happening. And so for my digital kit, I literally just brought this Canon EOS R and this Canon 50mm because I wasn't planning on doing a lot of stuff, but I did know that I had one session. So I figured I would take this sort of as a test, but also like I've shot with it enough and taken enough photos with it on film specifically that I knew it was actually a pretty good performer. And so we're gonna look at a couple of those photos, look at a few of the other photos that I've made with this lens, and talk about sort of the rationale behind why you should buy this thing. So all of these photos were taken on the Canon EOS R and the EF 50mm with this EF to RF adapter. From what I hear, the RF version is fairly similar, so I will link both of those in the description below if you want to check whatever current prices Amazon has for them. And then on top of that, these photos were edited with my Cascade presets. So if the overall tonality and stuff that you see in these photos is something you are interested in and you shoot Canon already, you can know that those are kind of the colors and whatnot you can expect if you decide to check out that preset pack. So you can see that 50mm on a full frame sensor gives you a decent amount of both compression and depth of field separation with that 1.8 aperture. And honestly, these are plenty sharp. I really like these photos of them walking. 50mm is enough that you can kind of get that full body environmental portrait while still having enough compression and whatnot to separate your subjects from the background. So you can do like the full body here like this, then kind of pull in and get some more close-up photos. Personally, I like a lot of like that, you know, full body environmental portrait style thing. And the 50mm does a really, really good job with that, as I usually use the Leica 50 Summilux for a lot of my work. But honestly, I think it's probably not a great thing to say, but I think that if I just posted these as my own work normally, I don't think anybody would really know that I was shooting it with a $100 lens versus a $4,000 lens. Now, you're gonna get a lot more consistency and it's gonna work in a lot better situations and all sorts of stuff when you're using a $4,000 lens versus a $100 lens. But my point being here is that it's much more about the lighting and the subject and the location and the color and the settings and all that kind of stuff. So when people rail against the fact that like gear doesn't matter or whatever, it's like, well, yeah, it clearly matters. It's like, that's why I don't shoot this as my primary lens, but it's still a lens that I think you can get professional results out of if you know what you're doing. So in all these, I can see that they all look really good. I think that there's a lot of good stuff to it. You definitely get some like that cat's eye style bokeh. The bokeh in the corners of a few of these is a little bit more, I guess, like busy than I would typically like. But overall, I don't think it's something that distracts enough to be detrimental to the image to not use it. Again, if I'm doing professional work, I'm probably gonna be using the L series or my Leica Summilux or something. But in a pinch, and in the times that I've used this, especially on film, I think that it renders really, really well. It has plenty of sharpness, and honestly, is something that I always recommend to photographers to pick up and put in their bag, even if they might not even think they need it. The other thing about this lens that has been really fun is I've filmed a few of my YouTube videos actually early on with it. It's obviously a little bit tighter to use a 50mm, and I definitely put it on the other side of my office to film some of them. But more recently, I did a shoot a few months ago with my friend Kristen Marie Parker, who's a great photographer, and we did a video for this thing through my gallery service called PicTime, where I filmed her talking about this app she had created along with PicTime, which is great. And actually, I'll put a link to PicTime in the description down below with, I think I should have a code or something like that for some sort of discount from them. I personally just recommend them and really love their stuff. So if you are interested more in that, this definitely isn't a sponsored video by them, but you can see in this footage that I took of my friend Kristen that with the kind of backlit look and everything like that, it kind of gives a really, really cool vibe to it. There was clearly a little bit of like almost hazy look to the image and whatnot, but for what it was, I actually feel like it looks really, really good. So you can tell that because of that, it doesn't exactly control light and everything, but I think that that whole like pro mist, moment cinebloom style look is something that I ended up getting a tiny, tiny, tiny bit out of this lens when filming with it. And honestly, it was a look I really liked in that particular instance. So if you're looking for something to do some minor video work with and want just another backup for that as well, especially on a Canon camera with dual pixel autofocus, it's again, something that works really well too. So overall, I would definitely, again, I've said it a lot in this video, but I definitely would recommend someone pick up this lens. So thanks so much for watching. I'll again put links to the lens as well as the adapter and then the RF one in the description down below. I think the results are much better, again, than you would think you would be getting out of such an inexpensive lens. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. I have, I think, 6 different 50mm lenses in my possession right now. So if you have any questions about 50mm in general, I would be happy to answer those and how they compare to other lenses and whatnot. And if you're not a subscriber, please consider subscribing for more videos like this. And if you have any suggestions for future videos, please leave them in the comments below as well. So thanks so much again, and I will see you on the next one.